Business as mission, as you know from reading the paper, is part of this broader movement. So it's the movement itself, many people will call business as mission as a movement of its own, and I will sometimes get a little careless as well and call it a movement. But strictly speaking, it's part of a broad movement happening in the church, even beyond business. So it's a specific part of this movement that includes various components. Now you've had a little chance to think about these. Now what's tent making? This is part of this broad movement. What do I mean by tent making? It's interesting that we get a pretty wide range of perspectives here between the three of you, and that's exactly the way it is out there, that even what you might think is a simple term like tent making, people can personalize it in very different ways. The way Johnson and I define it, and the way I would say it's most commonly defined, is the taking of a job in a cross-cultural context as a vehicle for other kinds of ministries. So now whether or not you're thinking about it as a cover per se, that varies from person to person, but so you may be a nurse, maybe not even a business person. You may be a nurse or a teacher, an engineer. There's a lot of ways you can go and serve abroad, serve a foreign company or a foreign school, and you are there earning money, but often there's this perception that you're earning money to make it possible to do the other stuff. That's the important stuff, is that ministry you're doing on the side, in the evenings and so on. So there's a range of views about, is the teaching itself a God-pleasing activity or not, or is that a distraction? Should I look for a teaching job that requires as little teaching as possible? Some agencies will recommend that. Look for a job that doesn't require me to work a lot of hours, and so on. So there's a range of views there, but the idea that it's the individual working and generating income. Marketplace ministries, there's no specific cross-cultural component to it. It could be, that gets included in here, and some of the businesses do in fact aspire to have some sort of a spiritual impact, but it varies. There's a wide range, so she was correct in that comment as well. So these can be businesses at home that it's not a cross-cultural activity. They are sincere believers trying to have a genuine positive impact in their sphere, and many of them do have that impact. And it could also include organizations, the parachurch organizations that are coming alongside businesses like those and helping them, encourage them in these areas. I would say Chick-fil-A fits into that category, yes. They have not been eager for business reasons. They're very strong evangelical Christians, and many of the family members, grandchildren and nephews and nieces, are missionaries in the mission field. But as a business, they have chosen so far to not go abroad. In fact, they've said, only half-jokingly, we're now in Los Angeles, and that's cross-cultural enough, coming from Georgia. And so, yes, I would say even In-N-Out Burger, at least when the original founders were there, they treated their workers, they still do, have a great reputation for how they treat their workers. On the bottom of every cup there's a Bible verse, and Christmas time you'll hear gospel-related advertisements and so forth. And that's all good. We don't want to say that's not enough, but there isn't the same intentional least reach. Let's go to the parts of the world where they haven't heard the gospel, not the same emphasis there. It's not the more difficult work of reaching a culture that's very foreign to you, which would be part of the definition of business as mission. So in the case of business as mission, then, there is definitely this cross-cultural going to where, like Paul, wanted to go where the gospel hadn't already been preached. He didn't say there was anything wrong with what Peter and the others were doing, building up the church in Jerusalem and other places more comfortable, but he didn't want to build on anyone else's foundation. He wanted to be out there where the gospel hadn't been heard before. And there's a segment of the church, and it's hard to guess how much. I've guesstimated about maybe 10% of Christians in all of our churches tend to have this bias towards the least reached. And that's where these people come from. They're business professionals, but they have this particular interest and concern for a specific country or a specific people group that's very foreign to them, but very needing of the gospel. And in the case of business as mission, then, you have two versions of it. We treated enterprise development in the paper as a distinctly different animal. But in many circles, when you talk about business as mission, people think instinctively of enterprise development. So that's why I've put it here, right under business as mission. So you have Great Commission companies, kingdom businesses, BAM businesses. There's all kinds of labels out there for what these are. Similar to tent making in the sense that they have this call cross-culturally. But in this case, you're not taking a job at a school or at a company. You are the company, and you're hiring people in that context. Sometimes foreign, sometimes locals, but you are building a company in that context. So it's a bit different from tent making. Similar in some ways, but still different. Enterprise development, some would say, is much different, doesn't even belong as part of this discussion. Do you remember why from reading the paper? These tend to be charities. Now, recently there have been some of these charities that have gone public and actually become for-profit. So that's changing a bit. But for the most part, these are still charities: Opportunity International, World Vision, Hope International, that are supported by donor funds, and they are in turn using those funds to help people start businesses. But you could think of that as a charitable act, and it's not as new. If you want to think, well, what's new here about business as mission? Having charities that help people start businesses is not that new or noteworthy. The church has been doing that in various forms for a long, long time, and operating within charity context. So what's new and profoundly different is that the next generation of missionary, many of them are being equipped and trained in schools of business like this. In the past, that wasn't the case. You survey a lot of missionaries out there, and they have zero business training. They were encouraged to go to Bible schools, get the Bible degrees and the seminary degrees, and so on. Also, and this doesn't apply to all these enterprise development organizations, but many of them don't discriminate. So they're just helping all poor, and the faith component is sometimes more overt than others. It depends on the organization. Enterprise development being a great way to get people, raise people out of poverty. So you may provide loans for somebody that helps them buy some goats, and they start producing goat milk and so forth, and it brings family up to and above the poverty line. But rarely do you see these businesses ever going much beyond that. In terms of getting plugged into a global market and really starting to employ lots of people, that's pretty exceptional. It does happen from time to time, but it's pretty rare. It brings them, it's a tremendously effective way to bring people out of poverty, but that's about where it stops. And so there's a lot of thinking in terms of how do we get them then to the next level, and that's a whole nother subject then.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.